Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program Jones and Company. On this program, we examine national issues. There have been many cries around the country about the immigration issue in our country, legal as well as illegal immigration. And today on our program, we are going to be speaking about that issue, and we are going to talk some matters of foreign affairs. And my guest on the program today is the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, Fred Mitchell. He is also the Member of Parliament for the Fox Hill constituency, and this is Mr. Mitchell's second stint in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is a regular on our program, and we are delighted to have him here again. Minister, welcome to the program.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice to be here.
I was saying before the program that I believe that you were the very first guest on Jones and Company. And we are celebrating our 18th year this month.
Wow.
And so here you are again.
Yes, right.
Yes.
It's great to be here. Yeah.
Your ministry, Foreign Affairs, let's talk about what is in the news, the appointments of ambassadors and the High Commissioner to London. You're pleased with the appointment, I'm sure.
Sure, I think it's a good team. You know, it's an experienced team. They were there before, some of them in different roles. For example, Mrs. Adams was the Consul General in Miami, and Ed Bethel was the Consul General in New York. And obviously the Prime Minister, whose appointments these are, was pleased at their performance. Certainly I can tell you the Bahamian community wanted Ed Bethel back in New York as quickly as possible, because they thought that he did an excellent job while he was there over those 5 years. And Mrs. Adams, I mean, she was a stellar performance while she was in Miami. You know, she's a Spanish speaker, and so she'll fit in well in Cuba, and I expect her to do a great job. And Ed Bethel, I think, a credit to the profession of journalism, and I expect him to take his skills to London that he honed in New York, dealing with the Bahamian community there. Because one of the special things about the ambassador to the United Kingdom, or the High Commissioner as it's called, is that the student community is so large in the UK that the success or failure of a High Commissioner in the UK is judged by how well you please the student community. And I got to say that you know, Sir Arthur Folkes before him and Paul Farquharson, you know, their specialty was getting along with the Bahamian student community. Mrs. Farquharson in particular would invite them over for the weekend. Some could spend the weekend and so on and so forth. So as far as the student community was concerned, they were great. And I was saying to the Prime Minister when he was asking my advice on the subject that you really have to please that community in order to succeed, and I think Ed Bethel will do a great job.
It's a promotion for Ed Bethel of sorts, since he was the Consul General in New York first. He's now High Commissioner and Ambassador to some other European Union countries.
That's right, and he's got the responsibility also for relations with the International Maritime Organization.
Dr. Nuri, Dr. Eugene Nuri, is the ambassador to the United Nations.
To the United Nations, yeah. There's a transition which is taking place. Ambassador Paul Ed Bethel is coming home the first of the year. After the General Assembly session is over, we thought it was better for the transition to take place after the GA is finished, because the GA starts in a couple of weeks, so rather than do it in the middle of that. And he, of course, as well, is very experienced. He was the ambassador to Haiti. In the meantime, he'll be doing some troubleshooting for the Prime Minister, one of which is this vexing issue of this plane that was seized by the Haitian government and has since, we understand, been released to the U.S. government. And so we're trying to get to the bottom of that, and his responsibility will be to try and troubleshoot that issue for us.
How do you answer the critics that these people are re-thread, so to speak, using the same people that you had in the previous administration of 2002?
Well, look, the people elected the government they elected, and we have to use the talents that we have. This is a very disciplined, distinguished team with experience, and they bring those experiences to the fore, and I'm satisfied that that will serve the country best. when the next set of appointments are done, you'll see that it'll be a mix of professional and political and young and old, and that's our way.
Yeah, talking about professionals, there are people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who I believe would wish to be high commissioners and ambassadors, and is there room for upward mobility in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if you are making these political appointments, bringing people from outside the ministry for these posts?
Well, I'd like all the junior officers to believe that one day they can actually be ambassador, and I think that's coming down the road as well. We made a pledge in our Charter for Governance that there would be a mix of appointments, and I expect that that's going to happen. But you know, the appointment under the Constitution is reserved to the Prime Minister advising the Governor General on the Article 111, and the Minister gives advice on the subject. But I'm pretty satisfied that on balance that we'll get the proper mix of professional and political.
One would have thought that your ambassador to the United States and Canada, since they are the major trading partners, would have been announced by now. You're going into 4 or 5 months after the general elections. You still do not have an ambassador to the United States nor Canada.
Well, you know, competition over these things is quite intense.
Competition, eh?
I'm sure.
Jockeying for positions?
I'm sure, you know, that many people have to come into the mix, and you know, a prime minister has to take into account all sorts of considerations in making these things. But it'll be done on a fairly timely basis, and I don't have any concerns about that. The post is manned, there are chargés in place, and any backup which is necessary from the capital, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will provide it until the prime minister has supplied us with an ambassador.
Brazil is one of the countries that is in the BRIC countries and doing extremely well, and people in the financial services sector, they go to Brazil. They want to tap the economy of Brazil. One would have thought that the government of the Bahamas would be also looking at making ambassadorial appointments for countries such as Brazil and South America.
That's coming too. I announced in the House during the budget debate that in the next budget cycle, Brazil is likely to be an ambassador, is to be appointed in Brazil, a resident ambassador. There are several people who are interested in being non-resident ambassadors now to do the sort of spade work to get that all up and going. The financial services sector says in at least one case 40% of the business being booked in this country is coming out of Brazil. So it's important for them, for their purposes, to have a trade office, to have a political presence in Brazil. So we're really conscious of that, and we're doing the footwork now to try and cost it out and determine in the next cycle what we're going to need. In the meantime, we are operationalizing the office in Geneva. An ambassador will go there from the Foreign Service, and we expect perhaps as early as December that should be operationalized. We actually have the office. We're paying in a joint effort with the Commonwealth, so it's just a question of getting it furnished and getting the people accredited. And one of the reasons that's important is because the WTO accession talks are going on, and we really need to have a physical presence in Geneva in order to get those things settled.
Dr. Paulette Bethel was our ambassador to the UN for a little while. Is she coming back in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Yes, she's coming back to the ministry. The Prime Minister said to get to take on administrative responsibilities in the ministry. I'd prefer the specific appointment to be announced by him, because you know it's again his decision. But that's the expectation, and that should happen the start of next year.
The last time I spoke with you, in your capacity as Minister of Foreign Affairs, we were talking about the need to develop a foreign service. Because while you have appointed high commissioners and ambassadors, there is a concern in the community that we do not have an active foreign service in the truest sense of the term. What are you doing in that regard?
Foreign Service orders, I'm hoping when the House convenes, and I'm saying this in a way to impose a deadline on myself and the ministry, that when the House reconvenes on the 16th of October, that the Foreign Service orders will be ready for laying before the House. And those Foreign Service orders will create a foreign service for the first time in the history of the Bahamas, which means a process, if I am supported in this, that will mean people migrating from the public service into being employees of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is the name of the corporation's soul under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act. And when that happens, I envisage that people will have a choice over a period of 2 years to determine whether they wish to remain in the public service or whether they wish to migrate over to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as the corporation's soul is known. That will mean a couple of things, one of which is that foreign service officers have a separate career path and track from the public service. And right now there's a duality which is going on. For example, you have in the administrative ranks of the public service, you have first assistant secretaries, undersecretaries, deputy permanent secretary. And then when you go overseas, you have counselors, minister counselor, attaché, and the question is always, how do you match up those grades with the public service grades? How do you make sure that people are compensated at the levels they should be and remain competitive with their contemporaries at home and abroad? For example, when we talked about the professional staff, one of the complaints of many of the professional staff is when they look at their contemporaries who they started out with serving overseas, from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from other countries, their members are now far above where they are in the Bahamian Foreign Service, and so they feel left behind. And you want your people to have a good work ethic, to have a high morale, and so all of that will help to resolve those problems. The other thing is that in the Foreign Service ranks, the way you are treated and accommodated often has to do with what your rank is in the Foreign Service. So, for example, you send someone out as an attaché, doesn't get the same respect and accommodation as, say, a second secretary or a minister counselor, which is quite high up. So we want to get all those sorts of things straight and get the allowances straight, get this whole idea of the turnover so people aren't, I think some people have been in post too long overseas. They need to come back home. We also have to do a bit of public education with the Bahamian public, who many of them just see the Foreign Service as a kind of dumping ground for everybody who wants to go to school overseas, or who wants to take care of their children overseas, or who wants to have who has a medical problem that they need to take care of. This is a professional service. There's a career path which you need to follow, and it's not a convenience. And so all of that we have to do, of course, in building the service.
Minister, just this last question in this segment, there are people who believe that these appointments are perfunctory, to say the least, and ambassadors and high commissioners have not been really pushing business for the Bahamas, working to ensure that the country benefit from the economies, say, of Canada or the United States or the United Kingdom, and that ambassadors are really on the cocktail circuit. How do you answer that?
Well, I agree that there's that sentiment out there that this is just a sort of glorified vacation. Part of it has to do, I think, with the fact that there is not a culture of interface and response to the community at large. Foreign Affairs, the ministry, its culture is that this is a specialized function which the public doesn't understand and which the public wouldn't understand, and is to some degree insensitive to public opinion about the matter. Now, part of my problem, I think the last time, was that I simply talked too much about it. And what happens in this society, which is what you see on the other side of my portfolio, immigration, is as soon as you begin articulating the issues, you become the target of the individuals with regard to every problem which they have with that particular subject. I just happen to believe that as a public official, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to articulate the subject and to discuss it as you go along, because you're constantly tweaking policy to get the feedback. And the other day, the Permanent Secretary and I was speaking because we had a request from one of the radio talk shows for someone to appear on the radio to discuss the issues relating to visas and how Bahamian visas are issued. It was a subject which I couldn't address because I was, for time reasons, couldn't go to the radio show, and we couldn't get a single one of the public servants to agree because to go and appear on the show.
Why?
Well, we were somewhat nonplussed about why, but I think it has to do with the fact of the lack of a culture of articulation, or the need for the public servant to be able to articulate publicly what positions are on various things. And these are purely, I mean, not purely, but largely visa applications. It's a technical function.
So the culture is for the minister to say...
Is to talk about everything. Everything.
And that is not right.
It is not right, and hopefully we've got other politicians now in the ministry. You've got an ambassador for CARICOM, you've got a parliamentary secretary, and I want to encourage them as we go along to be able to articulate what the ministry is actually doing and interface properly with the public. And the thing is, we also have down at the junior ranks, but you know, foreign ministry is very, very hierarchical, some really bright young people, you know, who are raring to go, and hopefully we can develop one of them into a spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so that you don't actually have to lean on the minister for every subject matter, because certain things are just routine things that can be announced or spoken to.
We're here with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, the Honourable Fred Mitchell. We take this break on Jones and Company. We'll come right back.
Hello Bahamas, my name is Craig Flowers. Today I'd like to talk to you about something that has always been very near and dear to me, and that is our environment. I came from a very humble two-bedroom wooden house, Kwaku Street, with an outdoor toilet. Today, I'm CEO of FML Group of Companies. But all my lifetime journey, I would have brought with me a tremendous amount of respect for our environment. So let us all chip in. Remember, when we invest into the environment, everybody wins. Thank you.
We're back here on Jones and Company, speaking today with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration. And Minister Mitchell, immigration is the hot button issue in the Bahamas today. Many people believe that since you were appointed Minister of Immigration, that you have not done enough on the illegal immigration issue. And throughout the campaign, on the various talk shows and other places, people were talking about getting rid of illegal immigrants in the country. You are now in the chair, and it is your duty to see to it that the law is carried out.
Well, the law is being carried out, and I don't have any doubt about that. The Department of Immigration suffers from a couple of issues. One of them is resources and lack of resources, and so the government's being mobilized to do that. There's a learning curve, I think, on what you actually have to do when you come to a job like this. One of the things I was surprised to find, for example, is that the Enforcement Division, which is responsible for these high-profile checks that people want, only has 12 people in it. So, you know, that's a starting point. We're going to do some recruiting within the next month, and I would like most of those people who are recruited to go directly to this enforcement unit. So you'll see it ramp up, I think.
So the Department of Immigration presently doesn't have the capacity to do what the Bahamian people want in terms of the roundup of illegal immigrants.
It does not. No, it does not. And I've tried also to stop using this nomenclature about roundups, because the interesting thing about this is that this policy of roundups and repatriations has been a failure from the 1950s onward. I mean, because it's just a revolving door. So obviously, you've got to try some new measures to try and stop this issue. And you know, I've said this before. Intelligence officers in Haiti. That means Bahamians who will be there watching over the situation as it develops, and then resources put at the southern end of the country to stop people from coming here. And then, of course, the interdiction that takes place here, which is what people are talking about, and what follows on from them is you go back, and we are also going to do prosecutions of people for actually being involved in the smuggling operations.
In terms of a policy on immigration, is the policy a relevant policy today? The government does have a policy, I'm sure, and one has been in place for a long time. But must the policy be revised to deal with the influx that we have had and we still have in the country?
Well, I don't think the policy, I suppose the nuances of it need to be revised, but the points are the same. You have to have international cooperation to stop it. You need to have more enforcement to stop it. And you need to do something about the economic problems of Haiti, because that's really what drives it. And the problem is the Bahamas is a relatively rich country. It sits next to an even richer country. And the IOM report in the first term that we had said that on any given day there are between 30,000 and 75,000 Haitian migrants in this country on their way to the United States. Most of them are. And that's just a consequence of our geography. The other thing, of course, is the political will of the Bahamian people, not the government, the Bahamian people at large on this issue. You know, as fast as you interdict and lock people up, you have another group of people who say let them go. And so it's, you know, this balancing act that's going on all the time, or more properly put, an ambivalence. And as I said, because I'm the one who's articulating it and I'm the one sitting in the seat, you become the focus of all of this. But, you know, Fred Mitchell can't solve the illegal migrant problem in the Bahamas. The Bahamian people have to solve that problem, and they have to make up their minds what it is they want to do on this issue. I said to you in the pre-show, before we started taping, you know, the Enforcement Division went out, and they're doing this every week, notwithstanding what people say. It's being done every week, and repatriations are taking place virtually every week. They go out, and I think 99 people were interdicted one evening and detained in the detention center. And as I said to the officers, I don't need to know. All I need you to do is enforce the law. I don't need you to tell me. I don't need any you don't need any specific permission from me. The law is what it is, and the law's consequences should follow. Just enforce the law. So, of course, my phone starts ringing, virtually off the hook. I keep wondering, why are these people calling me, right? Well, it turns out immigration had people in the detention center, and this one. You've locked up my gardener. You've locked up my maid. You've locked up my handyman. Could you please let him out? Could you do this? This one was born here. He doesn't know anything about Haiti. You can't repatriate that person, so on and so forth. And you just go down the list. These are the same people now who are shouting and screaming on the radio talk shows that you got to round up and throw these people out. So that's the issue. Now, what I'm saying to people, and I say it, you know, and I say it again, I've said it to several of the radio talk shows and on television shows I've been on. There is too slack a view about the documentation which is needed or required to show that you have the right of residence in the Bahamas. You have to have a passport, which shows you're Bahamian, or a voter's card, which also shows that you're Bahamian, or some form of documentation from the Department of Immigration if you're a non-national, which shows that you have a right to reside here. Because immigration is going to be doing checks. We're also encouraging the police as a part of the routine of their operations that when they stop people on the streets for offenses for which they are reasonably suspected, they are, as part of their routine checks, to also check immigration status. And those people who don't have the status are going to be detained, and if there are no intervening circumstances, will be deported. Now, the harsh reality of that is this: for a class of people who are born in this country, whose parents are not Bahamian, and who have not made any attempt to apply for Bahamian citizenship or some status, the harsh reality of that fact is, and I didn't write the law, but the law exists, is that they will be deported. Okay. And I'm saying to people, get your documentation in order, because that's what's coming, and that's what exists. And it would be no point calling me, because my hands are tied on the matter. The law is what the law is.
You spoke about the will of the Bahamian people. What about the will of the government of the Bahamas to beef up this whole question of interdiction? You mentioned that you have a level of incapacity insofar as you don't have sufficient people to do the work. That shows that the government itself doesn't have the will to do what needs to be done. There was a time when policemen and defense force officers were called upon to assist the immigration department.
Well, they have the powers now, and they do assist. But what I'm saying is that, you know, this is an inherited issue for us in this administration, 100 or so plus days into this administration. So things have to, there's a learning curve, there's also a ramping up of these on these matters. We are addressing the issue of resources by hiring more people. That's and you know, I said to, just talking to the director today, I said, you know, in the recruitment, I'd like to be sure that we focus on recruiting people who are specifically suited for enforcement, because I recognize that that's what the Bahamian public wants. They want the enforcement section of immigration to be ramped up, and that's what we intend to do. Secondly, you've heard the Minister of National Security talk about the commitment to investing in new equipment for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the boats. We need a lot more boats in order to bottle this situation up. So I think it's not a question of a lack of political will on our part, certainly not. And I think you're going to see results in this. What we want, though, and I say this in another forum, is I think we want, you know, the minister must be to dress up in fatigues and go on the streets with a gun in his hand and start rounding up migrants, but that's not the ministerial role. What's going to happen is there's going to be a sustained policy to enforce the law, and you will see it done on a sustained basis. What happens is, what has happened in the past is, you have particular ministers or a minister or a government responding to the cries of the Bahamian public, and they keep it up for 6 weeks, and then when the Bahamian public gets satisfied, that's the end of that, until there's another cry again. And I'm saying that the routine of the department has to be precisely enforcing the law, and the Bahamian public has to have a culture of documentation about their right to be in this country.
Yeah, but the perception is that you are soft on illegal immigration, that there are many in your constituency, many people who are of Haitian descent, who live in Fox Hill, and that Fred Mitchell is perhaps too soft on illegal immigration.
Well, you know, people are entitled to their perceptions, you know, but I just say like Pierre Trudeau said when he had to take steps against the guerrillas in Quebec, you know, and he said, how can you, a civil libertarian, do this? And he said, just watch me. See, I ain't got no time to sort of be boasting about what I'm going to do and not going to do, right? Watch me enforce the law.
There are people who also bemoan the fact that sloops can come down the Bahamian chain, and sometimes found by the Defense Force personnel off South Beach, in New Providence, or coming up to Prince George Wharf. These people who are coming to the Bahamas illegally in boats, rickety boats. So certainly our defense force capability, there's incapacity there as well.
I suspect so. I mean, it's inexplicable to me. I've raised the issue in opposition with the defense force, and I think they've pleaded resources as an issue. But, you know, August and September are months when the seas are flat, the moon is full, and you can really set off the northern end of Haiti, and the tides will take you right up. And I can't figure out why, with these slow boats, as you say, you can't really spot it. Now, some friends of mine said there's some Israeli technology which is available, can help with this. So I'm referring all these matters over to the national security people so they can have a look at it. I mean, look, it's a tortuous problem and it's a difficult problem, and you know, the public is dissatisfied and the public is rowing and so on and so forth, and you've got to be sensitive to that, right? But the government has to take a sustained, intelligent, dedicated set of policies, proposals, plans, and actions to try and get on top of this issue. And the main problem is the will of the Bahamian public on the matter.
Well, the will is there, as we hear on
no,
various talk shows.
I hear what you say.
The will is there.
Well, first of all, the talk shows,
yes.
You know, people like to row on talk shows, but I'm saying to you that that's the Bahamians in a macro sense. You know, in a macro sense, everybody's for Bahamianization and everybody's for rounding up illegal migrants.
In the micro sense, don't touch my Asian.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Let's talk about this matter a little more, but we have to take a break here on Jones and Company. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, the Honourable Fred Mitchell, our guest. We'll come right back.
In a world of globalization, economic uncertainty, terrorism, culture clash, family disintegration, corporate distrust, youth disillusionment, political confusion, and religious corruption, the wisdom to navigate successfully through life is necessary. Welcome to Living Effectively. Living Effectively, a program designed to provide wisdom, insight, information, and inspiration to effectively face the challenges of the 21st century world. Living Effectively.
Tune in to Living Effectively, Sundays at 3:30 p.m. right here on JCN Channel 14.
Hello Bahamas, my name is Craig Flowers. Today I'd like to talk to you about something that has always been very near and dear to me, and that is our environment. I came from a very humble, two-bedroom wooden house, Kwaku Street, with an outdoor toilet. Today, I'm CEO of FML Group of Companies. But all my lifetime journey, I would have brought with me a tremendous amount of respect for our environment. So let us all chip in. Remember, when we invest into the environment, everybody wins. Thank you.
We're back here on the program Jones and Company today. We are talking about immigration matters largely with the Minister of Immigration, Mr. Mitchell. And Mr. Mitchell, we spoke about policy, but there are, I don't know what the law is with respect to the hiring of illegal immigrants or the renting of houses to illegal immigrants. There are a lot of landlords in our country have no difficulty in allowing illegal immigrants to rent their places.
Yep, and powerfully placed in the country. So that's the issue, and that's what I mean about this ambivalence. And in a way, you know, as an immigration minister, you're charged with enforcing the law, carrying out the laws of the country, and you shouldn't really be describing the problem. But you know, part of an intelligent solution to the problem is articulating what the various issues are. But as I say, you know, all of that aside, you know, I'm dedicated to enforcing the law, and it's not my style to be, you know, involved in histrionics and jumping up and down. I just say, watch the law being carried out, and then when you start to scream, don't ring me on the phone. I'm telling you now, don't do it.
Okay.
All right.
An illegal immigrant is hospitalized. He or she gets treatment in our Princess Margaret Hospital. The person is about to be discharged, but you are illegal. What should the government do or the law enforcement officers do?
Well, anyone who is illegal should be detained. That's it.
So, after coming off the male surgical ward or the female medical ward, and you are illegal and that is known, you should be arrested.
I think so. Yeah.
You think so?
Absolutely.
But it's not happening.
Well, you know, I'm saying the culture of this. For example, the bit I just said to you about the police officers on their routine stops. That's not the culture in the place. That's not the program that's been followed in the past. So all of these measures have to come into place, and you know, it takes a while for them to come into place. And as I say, you may not think that this is important, but you know, law enforcement is conducted within the confines, if you will, of a society as a whole. I mean, you just have to look, for example, at what has happened with the numbers business. Of course, it's unlawful, but where's the enforcement? And it's reached the point now, from a policy point of view, where people are saying it is unenforceable, victimless, so why not regularize it and make it in conformity with the law? And that's just one example. Now, I'm not saying that things are going to shift to that extent with illegal migration, because clearly it has great social impacts on our society. You know, just this week there was a report of a landing in Devil's Point, Cat Island. There was another report last night of a landing in Eleuthera, and the enforcement of division of the Department of Immigration has to go out. They have to leave their homes at night and are hunting through the bush to try and find these people. In most cases, they find them because the communities at large cooperate with making sure that any time any strange person shows up, the Immigration Department knows.
This is what happens in Long Island, for instance.
Long Island, Cat Island, what happened in Andros, you know, what is happening in Eleuthera and in Abaco. But these are sophisticated smuggling operations. People pay large sums of money to do it, and the society just has to be committed to defeating it, and we are.
We are not rated well by the United States on the question of human trafficking. We're getting bad marks, apparently. And is this an area that your ministry is concerned with?
Well, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs deals with the question of human trafficking and the issues which arise out of that with the United States of America. The issue of human smuggling is tied sometimes to human trafficking, but the two are not the same. So immigration would, to that extent, be involved in the human trafficking issues. And I say it this way, human trafficking is defined more narrowly and has to do with the oppression of people for sexual reasons, also for holding people's passports to prevent them from working freely and moving about in a country. So the Americans have issues with that and our laws and how we're enforcing them and how we're investigating them. We happen to think that the American position on this is not a reasonable position, that it is misplaced, but you know, they're the big giant in the hemisphere. Their policy is what it is, and we have to, as a practical matter, respond to their concerns. And it has a practical impact because certain sanctions can follow if we don't address the issues. We're seeking to work with them. The next reporting period for these extraterritorial laws that they have is the 31st of March, and we're trying to meet that deadline so that we don't have any adverse consequences on that issue.
So the Americans have been unfair on the question of human trafficking?
No, I think their policy is misplaced.
The policy is misplaced or unfair?
No, I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm saying the policy is misplaced. I think they think they're being fair and that they're doing something to move the process along, but this is extraterritorial, and it's domestic legislation which is having an extraterritorial effect.
Okay. Back to the problem of illegal immigration. Our schools, the classrooms are too large, and I am told that at, say, Columbus Primary School, 50% of the enrollment in that school are children of Haitian descent, which means that the Bahamian taxpayers are paying for the education of thousands of children who are here and their parents are undocumented. Yes?
Well, I'm not sure that that follows.
Well,
I'm not sure that it follows that they're undocumented.
Well, okay, let's say we have a good percentage of them who are here illegally.
Well,
could that be right?
No, we know that there is an illegal migration problem.
Yes.
The extent of it statistically, I don't know in the school system. You may also say that, you know, given just anecdotally the names of, when you hear the names, that in some cases there may be a third, you say 50%, I don't know, but these are guesses, I would suppose.
No, I got it from the Ministry of Education,
right,
that 50% of the children in Columbus Primary
School. Columbus Primary, I see.
Now, there are some other schools in the southern part of New Providence.
Mm-hmm. And the point you're leading to is, I mean, just finish the point.
The point is whether or not the parents of these children, the illegal ones, mm-hmm, the illegal parents now, mm-hmm, are the subject of investigation, or would they be interdicted by the Immigration Department?
Well, their parents are.
Yes.
Their parents are. I mean, there are certain rules of engagement with regard to children, and
yes,
you know, going into schools and churches and so on and so forth. But if their parents are unlawful, their parents will be detained and their parents will be deported, and the children will have to leave with them. That's it.
But aren't you hard pressed in many cases to do this, since some parents would have a number of children who are attending school? What do you do? What should the Immigration Department do when you find that there are people here illegally who have 3, 4 children who are attending our schools? What happens to the children if you are going after the parents?
No, the children have to go with their parents.
In the detention center?
No. Sorry, we're not talking about the detention center. I'm saying that if there is a repatriation or deportation, the children must leave with their parents.
Yes, but first of all, you have to arrest the parents.
That's right, but there are certain rules of engagement, as I say, with regard to children, and children are not detained in the detention center. There are Ranfurly homes, the children's homes, that's where children would go. You wouldn't keep children in the detention center, no. Okay. You don't do that. I mean, it's a very difficult business and a touchy business. I don't know if you remember, years ago there was an evacuation which took place of some migrants who had wandered onto Key Lobos. Mm-hmm. and the American press was there. And in that evacuation, there was a fight which has ensued between Bahamian and officials, Bahamian police,
yes,
and the migrants. And you know what the adverse effect was on our own country for that. You know, that we were being cruel, that we were being inhumane. So there's also the international dimension to this, right? And what happens is, so I see people who meet me in the street, and this is the sentiment in the country, and I'll encapsulate it like this. There are too many Haitians here. They're taking over our country. They're going to subvert our culture, and we must get them all out. Now, that's the raw emotional sentiment of it. But I don't believe that you can actually respond to raw emotional sentiment. A government has to be judicious and sensible and act in the general public interest and in the country's best interest. That is what we're there to do. We're there to govern. Mm-hmm. And I want to make the point again that the laws will be enforced, and the laws will be enforced strictly. But the Bahamian public has to recognize that we're not although we're an island nation, in a political and in the international geopolitics, we are not an island. We don't exist by ourselves. And so policies have to be applied judiciously. And no matter how many times people force you in a try to force you in a particular direction, the government has to hold its head and act judiciously.
To what extent is the government culpable and it should be indicted by the people who are calling for action, since we know that there are hundreds or perhaps thousands of immigrants in this country who have applied for status, whether it's work permit, permanent residency, or citizenship. And these matters have not been attended to for many, many years. To what extent is the government of the Bahamas ineffective in this regard and ought to be indicted for the sloth or the indifference to the matter?
Look, this issue is rooted in the decision made in 1973 to change the law with regard to citizenship of the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. And that law says that if your parents are not Bahamian and you are born here, you're not a citizen of the Bahamas. You contrast that to the United States, where Bahamians take their kids, have children in the United States. They deliberately do it so that their children can have dual nationality. But the argument is that the same should not apply to people who come to the Bahamas and have their children. That's what the law is. The consequence of that has been that, the law also provides that at your 18th birthday and before your 19th birthday, you can apply for citizenship and you are entitled to become a citizen of the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. The problem is we've not been able to keep up, as you say, with the applications and dealing with them on a timely basis. The other issue, of course, is the public education on the subject. You talk about my constituency. I know of scores of youngsters who live in my constituency who are unaware of what the law is on this subject. And others who are aware of the law on the subject who have applied. Some have been waiting as long as 10 years to get an answer to their applications. Now, what you have, of course, is the public at large on the radio talk shows, or one section of the public, who's saying, get rid of all of these people. I suppose that's one view.
Yeah, but what do you do with the applications that you have collecting dust in Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Immigration Department? What do you do? I had a gentleman who called me on one of the talk shows who is married to a Bahamian woman, Haitian national, and he applied and for many years wanted a particular status, can't get it. And some people are not getting answers. You have people who, upon reaching 18, have applied and their applications have been there for years. They're 20-something now. What do you do with these people? Because, really, they're here illegally, aren't they?
That's right.
So what do you do?
That's right.
What do you do with the woman or the man in Foxhill who was born in the Bahamas, applied at the age of 18, but now is 24, 25?
No, if you listen to the talk shows, the answer is to put them out. Now, you would say, of course, that any government looking sensibly at that issue would know that that's not a practical or lawful solution to the problem.
Well, fix it. But what are you going to do to fix it?
Well,
you're in charge now.
No, I admit to you that we're in charge, and the applications will be processed as efficiently as the resources permit. That's what's going to happen. The law is going to be followed, and I mean the law in all of its senses. But what I don't want you to do, or to, and I mean you in the sense of representing that point of view that's being advanced for the purposes of this for this program, is to separate that from the larger issue of Bahamians and their attitudes toward this subject.
Yes,
is that on the one hand, you're saying round up and throw them out. But it isn't as simple a problem as it appears.
But I get the impression that Bahamians are incensed over this matter because of the pace at which the government is attending to these matters. The government of the Bahamas has not been dealing with applications for permanent residency or citizenship in a very effective way. And as a consequence, many people are very frustrated over this issue.
I think that there is, I would agree that there's been delay, and that has caused a whole set of problems. But what I think is that there are also probably some reform measures that need to take place, but that has to come out of a larger political discussion, and above my pay grade at the moment.
Above your pay grade?
Yes, right. I'm discharged.
There's a thing
I'm charged at the moment with enforcing the law as it is. Now, I can give you a lot of commentary and my personal views about what should happen and what should not happen. What I know is the law is what it is, and I'll seek to enforce the law.
But there's collective responsibility.
I don't think it is.
You said as a government. And
I'm pledged to take the reform measures to the government. For example, one idea might be to delegate the authority for granting citizenship to a cabinet committee instead of the full cabinet, or to delegate it to the minister responsible for citizenship.
Or to have a commission. You have a public service commission doing certain things. Why couldn't there be a commission dealing with the issue of permanent residency and citizenship? You've made it such a political issue that the entire cabinet has to sit on a matter of permanent residency and citizenship in 2012.
Well, I understand that criticism, and the citizenship issue, of course, is one which would have to be resolved by constitutional reform. So we'll see what the Constitutional Reform Commission says next year.
Okay.
Because obviously all of those things have to be. And you know, where there's going to be another fight, I was smiling at the Prime Minister when we were talking about the changes that they're proposing with regard to women in the Constitution, is that, you know, when it becomes clear that one of the equalities that will have to be advanced is that just as female spouses of Bahamians, female spouses who are non-nationals of Bahamians, are now entitled to apply for citizenship, that same privilege has to be afforded, if you're going to have equality, to male non-national spouses of Bahamian women.
Yeah.
I'm going to see what the society does.
Well, the society will do something, I'm sure. But, Minister, you know, sometimes you wonder whether or not Bahamians are a little too xenophobic or negrophobic in dealing with matters of citizenship and permanent residency. There are many people in this country of the Caucasian race who are not Haitian nationals, who are Englishmen and Americans or Canadians, Jamaicans, who are here illegally, and we don't see well, not in the case of Jamaicans, because Bahamians are very concerned about Jamaicans as well. But people from North America or Europe who are here illegally.
Look, I was telling, I've said this story so many times. In 1804, after the revolution in Haiti, the administration in charge then, the colonial administration, passed laws because they were so afraid of the Haitians who were migrating here. They called them French Africans in those days, who came here. And they were afraid that the revolution was going to spread to this country. So they passed laws to stop black people from aggregating on the street in order to prevent the revolution from spreading. Those laws, some of which were not repealed until the 20th century. So, I mean, there's a long history of trying to deal with this issue.
Yeah, yeah. In addition to the problem of illegal immigration, we have legal immigration in the Bahamas that many professional Bahamians are concerned.
So I'm glad you get to that, because you see, I laid out what my philosophy was this, and I always say to my friends that I must speak Greek, or I must speak in a funny language, because I'm a very transparent person. I say at the start of when I got this job, the very first thing I said, I understand everybody's excitement about this identifiable group of African people from down south who you say are illegal migrants, and they're identifiable and relatively easy to deal with because you know how they come, you know when they come, and you know what to do in order to get them back home. And they're not going to fight you. You're not going to have a warfare with them, and they're not going to have the clout to fight you politically. The more difficult issue is the legal migration which is taking place, and those people who are coming in through the professions, and the attack on the Bahamian middle class that we're not keeping our eyes focused on.
Yes.
And one of the points I raised is I do not understand why in 2012 the domestic banking sector has to have any non-nationals running any aspect of the professional of the banking sector.
In domestic banking?
In domestic banking.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
Okay.
And, you know, to the extent that I can, I want to drive policy to ensure the Bahamianization fully of the domestic section of banking in this country.
Having said that, and we are in this globalized world and the free movement of people and money, how are you going to contend with an issue like that if you want to really grow the economy of the Bahamas? Because you would have foreign institutions saying to you, listen, in order for us to be here or for us to grow this bank, you're going to need to accept some of expatriate workers.
No, I agree with you, and I mean it's dynamic. It's not static, and of course, we have a very dynamic Minister of Trade who's responsible for financial services, and with a financial services sector, you need to have that kind of fluidity in the labor force. So you know, these things are not these are not easy issues to resolve, and whoever's sitting in the chair doesn't have an easy job of it. What I said is, with the world becoming more rules-based in trade, which is what WTO is, then you have exchanges and agreements with countries on these various things. We're negotiating in the CARICOM context right now with the Canadians on what the trade rules are going to be between us and Canada. Yeah. I don't understand why. You know, if Canadians want to come here and work, then Bahamians ought to be able to work in Canada. Yeah. That's how I think it ought to work.
As Minister of Immigration, has there been an audit of the number of immigrants who are here legally, working in our banks, our hotels, or wherever, accounting firms? Is there an audit? Do we know that number?
I'm sure we know the number. I'm not sure there's been an audit. I mean, and I've been asked for various numbers because I think, again, the talk shows have been quite exercised, I'm told, over the question of the names of people who were granted citizenship. I have now the names of those who were sworn in as citizens between 2007 and 2012. I've asked them to get the names of those who were actually granted citizenship, but as you know, there's a difference, and can be a significant difference between those who actually are sworn in and those who are granted citizenship.
My final question to you: Canada developed and became a multicultural, multiracial society. There is a view that if the Bahamas is going to grow and develop as it ought and to be competitive, we need to be a little more open and develop this place into exactly that, multicultural, multi-racial society, a kind of melting pot, as America became?
I think there, obviously, there's a lot to be recommended for that way of thinking, but the Bahamian public has to come to that consensus, and right now it doesn't appear that we're there yet. It's there in bits and pieces, and what needs to develop, of course, is a civil society that articulates these issues. When you're in government, that's not the role of a minister in government. I'm tasked with the law as it is to enforce the law. I intend to enforce the law. I think we try to build a certain consensus in the cabinet on where the policy ought to change, but we're Democrats, and so we have to actually listen to where people are.
Minister, thank you very much for being here today.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening to our program, and there are many more questions for the Minister, but we are flat out of time, and he is always willing to come back, I'm sure. So we thank him very much for being here today. Thank you very much for watching and listening to our program. Good evening, everyone.